Hello and welcome back. Once again, I'm your instructor, Lukas, and today we'll be looking at various concepts and techniques to assist you with being a better and more effective reader, with ideas drawn from Chapter 6, Reading, in the textbook I wrote, College Composition and Reading, Information and Strategies. One of the most important skills to have to do well with most college reading is to be able to identify the main idea, which consists of the topic or subject, plus the argument or perspective being advanced. If that definition sounds familiar, it should, as it is both what a thesis statement is for an essay, as well as what a topic sentence is for a paragraph. However, not all writing you encounter comes equipped with clear and direct thesis statements and topic sentences, as you've likely already noticed if you're doing the reading responses that I assign. However, just because main ideas are sometimes hard to identify doesn't mean you shouldn't bother. On the contrary, there are several reasons why it's important and useful to identify main ideas. First and most importantly, knowing the main idea means that you understand what the author was trying to get across. It also helps you to interpret the information and arguments given, including giving you guidance about what is a main idea and what is a trivial detail or tangent, as well as knowing why each belongs in the group it's in. Knowing why details are relevant to the thesis also helps you to remember them better. Another advantage of knowing the main idea is that it helps you read faster and more efficiently, as you can pay more attention and concentrate harder on the important aspects while reading more quickly past unimportant aspects. Identifying these main ideas is also the main skill needed for writing summaries. You will use these often in your academic life, both because teachers assign summaries to check students' understanding and because you'll use summaries in your own papers as support for your ideas. Because of its utility in getting information conveyed in a concise manner, the ability to write a good summary can often be useful in the working world as well. Finally, identifying main ideas is an excellent and useful skill for studying. Writing summaries or outlines, both of which use main idea identification, are both excellent ways to take notes, giving you not only something to look at later, but also more engagement with the material. Simply doing the summary and consciously picking out the main ideas will help you to both understand and remember the material better. Students often have ineffective practices for summarizing, such as choosing some sentences to copy and others to leave out. But this copy and paste method is counterproductive, and many passages don't have explicit topic sentences, which this method relies on. Summary should be a process in which ideas of a passage are related to one another, weighed, and condensed, a process of synthesis and evaluation, not mere copy and paste selection. Repeated reference and generalization are two methods you can use to condense information and decide what is important when what you're reading doesn't have explicit topic sentences. Repeated reference, as you might guess, capitalizes on the fact that the more an idea is referred to by other ideas, the more important it is. Logically, something that keeps being referred to is important to what the author had to say. However, it's important to remember that only rarely will the author use the exact same words or phrases to refer to an idea. Just like you, they try to avoid sounding repetitive while maintaining the focus on the important aspects. So it's useful to be on the lookout for the idea being repeated rather than looking for the exact words to be repeated. Look for synonyms and other references. Repeated references are helpful and relatively easy to find cues to importance because they're part of the surface structure of the text. However, often the gist is not part of the surface structure, but must be created or deduced by the reader, which is where the technique of generalization comes in. Researchers identified 3 processes that go into constructing a gist or basic understanding of the core of a piece of writing. First is deletion, which is leaving out or deleting specific details, unless they're necessary for understanding. Then we have generalization, which means that for each group of ideas, paragraph or group of paragraphs, substitute a sentence that pulls together the specific ideas. general enough to cover the details, but not vague. Try to find a way to group or categorize the ideas together. And finally, what they called construction, which is where you build new ideas and understanding through critical thinking skills such as inferring, determining the thesis, or coming to a conclusion about the text as a whole are both kinds of construction. Really, it's any idea that's not contained in the original text. So then, while you can use repeated reference to determine which ideas or concepts are the most important, you can use generalization to transform lists of specific details or examples into more general statements that will be useful not only in writing a summary, but in getting an idea of what the overall concept or gist of the reading is. Being able to take specific statements and translate them into a general category based on their similarities is an important skill in being able to do generalization well. Both of these skills can help you identify main ideas, which in turn can help you write summaries. Understanding the main ideas is also key for effective studying. It doesn't matter how well you learn something if it wasn't what you were supposed to have learned. To get a better idea of how these two techniques can work together, let's take a look at an example. As I mentioned, repeated reference can help you decide what is the most important. For example, this original passage is mostly just a list of details. It reads, "Following James Marshall's discovery of gold at Sutter's Mill in Coloma in 1848, California's population leaped from 14,000 to 250,000 in only 4 years. Between 1850 and 1859, miners extracted 28,280,711 fine ounces of gold. California has the largest economy in the United States, and in 1997 was the first state to reach the $1 trillion benchmark in gross state product. In 2012, California was ranked the 9th largest economy in the world. California grows more than 3.3 million tons of wine grapes, over 540,000 acres each year, and produces roughly 90% of all U.S. wine. The highest and lowest points in the continental United States are located within 100 miles of one another in California. Mount Whitney measures 14,505 feet, and Badwater Basin in Death Valley is 282 feet below sea level. Considered to be the hottest, driest place in the United States, Death Valley often reaches temperatures greater than 120 degrees Fahrenheit during the summer and averages only around 2 inches of rain each year. With a trunk slightly greater than 102 feet in circumference, the General Sherman in Sequoia National Park is the largest living tree by volume in the world. It is estimated to be somewhere between 1,800 to 2,700 years old. Despite its urbanization and the loss of land to industry, California still leads the country in agricultural production. About 1/2 of the state's land is federally owned. National parks located throughout the state are devoted to the preservation of nature and natural resources. Now, if we were to look for repeated references, we can see that there are a lot of numbers indicating how big or extreme things are. So notes for repeated reference might look like this: lots of gold, lots of money / economy, lots of grapes, high and low points close, hottest, driest place, extreme weather, biggest tree, most agriculture. The bottom line then, for what is being referred to a lot, is that California is a state with lots of big and extreme things, from agriculture and economy to natural features like the weather and the landscape. From that, we can make a generalization about this list of details, that California is a land of natural extremes, with the largest economy and most agriculture in the entire country, as well as extreme weather, a high and low point less than 100 miles apart, and the largest living tree in the world. Even that might be a bit specific, and kind of reads more like a summary than a statement of the main idea, so we can condense it down further, removing more of the specifics while still capturing the main idea, and say that California is a land of extremes, from economy to topography and weather. Now that you've seen a bit about how to identify the main idea, let's look at summaries themselves. As noted in your textbook, summaries' talent for condensing information makes them a popular form of communication in both formal and informal settings. One of the most important skills to have to do well with most college reading is to be able to produce a summary. As I'm sure you know, a summary is a brief and condensed version of information given in your own words. When you're assigned an academic summary, or do one as a study aid, it should generally be brief, complete, and objective. Whenever a summary is presented by itself and not as part of another piece of writing, it should have these features. On the other hand, if you're using summary as a tool to put information into a pie paragraph, for example, then there are slightly different guidelines for this different writing situation. Those summaries will still be brief. If anything, they'll be even more so than the standalone summaries I was discussing a moment ago. But they will be much more narrowly focused. When doing an assigned summary, what's important is anything the author considers important. When using summary as a tool, what's important shrinks, becoming only the aspects that are salient or relevant to the point that you're trying to make. Thus, these types of summaries are often shorter and leave out aspects the author considered important points. These types of summaries will often be much more subjectively phrased as well, with charged language used to influence the reader's reaction. However, for either type of summary, you nearly always want to mention the author, the title of the work you're summarizing, and the overall point or gist of the writing right at the start of your summary. Finally, when writing your summary, remember to focus on the main idea and evaluate whether certain details or topics should be included by how connected or relevant they are to the main idea of the writing. Now that you've heard about the basics of writing a good summary, let's look at some not so good examples and evaluate what's wrong with them, as well as looking at a well-done summary. Obviously, the first step to doing a summary is to read the original passage. This passage about the ancient philosopher Socrates reads, "Socrates is unique among the great philosophers in that he is portrayed and remembered as a quasi-saint or religious figure. Indeed, nearly every school of ancient Greek and Roman philosophy, from the skeptics to the Stoics to the Cynics, desired to claim him as one of their own. Only the Epicureans dismissed him, calling him, quote, the Athenian buffoon." Socrates and his followers expanded the purpose of philosophy from trying to understand the outside world to trying to tease apart one's inner values. His passion for definitions and hair-splitting questions inspired the development of formal logic and systematic ethics from the time of Aristotle through the Renaissance and into the modern era. Moreover, Socrates' life became an exemplar of the difficulty and importance of living, and if necessary, dying, according to one's well-examined beliefs. In his 1791 autobiography, Benjamin Franklin reduced this notion to a single line: humility. Imitate Jesus and Socrates. Now that we've looked at our original passage, let's check out some examples of summaries. First, I'll read the summary, and then I'll give you a moment to decide what, if anything, is wrong with it before I share my own evaluation. The first summary reads, "Socrates was really famous. Everyone wanted him to join them. The passage talks about how he changed philosophy, and even Benjamin Franklin talked about him." What, if anything, is wrong with this summary? This summary is problematic. It is too vague and non-specific, so much so that it misses the point. In addition, oversimplification also leads to some inaccurate information. For example, really famous is not the same as being seen as a figure with religious importance. Our next summary reads, "Socrates is unique because he was seen as a religious figure. Most of the ancient schools of philosophy said he was like them, except for the Epicureans. They didn't like him and even called him a buffoon. Socrates and the people who came after him changed philosophy from only being about understanding the outside world to also being about examining your own inner values. Socrates' love of questioning and definitions shaped philosophy from the time of Aristotle all the way to the present. His life also showed how sometimes you have to die for what you believe in. Benjamin Franklin says that to have humility, Jesus and Socrates are the people to emulate. What, if anything, is wrong with this summary? This one is too specific, gives all of the details instead of just the important ones, and is more like a paraphrase than a summary. Every sentence has a corresponding sentence, and all the details are included, rather than the author being selective. Let's look at a few more example summaries. The next summary reads, Socrates was seen as almost a saint, which was different than other philosophers who were mostly not liked at the time and were seen as lazy, unworthy tricksters. Socrates changed the direction of philosophy, since before that it was all about understanding the outside world. For example, Pythagoras tried to use numbers and math to understand how the cosmos and nature worked, and Hippocrates studied the human body to see how it worked in order to support health and practice effective medicine. Socrates was all about questioning people to get them to figure out things for themselves, and most of his discussions were about qualities such as loyalty or abstractions like virtue. This focus on questioning and defining things inspired the development of formal logic and systematic ethics from the time of Aristotle through the Renaissance and into the modern era. In addition, Socrates was an example of how important it is to live by your values and beliefs, and also how difficult it can be, since his led directly to allowing himself to be killed. Even Ben Franklin, an American born nearly 2 millennia after Socrates' death, said that the best way to be humble is to imitate Jesus and Socrates. What, if anything, is wrong with this summary? This one gives their own examples and information not found in the text. If the example is not given in the source, then you cannot use it in the summary. You're welcome to include it after the closing citation shows that you're no longer summarizing, but a summary should only include information that is in the source and nothing that you make up. It also has the phrase, inspired the development of formal logic and systematic ethics from the time of Aristotle through the Renaissance and into the modern era, taken directly from the original, but without quotation marks, which is a very serious problem that technically qualifies as plagiarism. Finally, it is way too long. It's actually 2 lines longer than the original. If your summary is as long or longer than the original text, you're doing it wrong. Whew! Only one more example summary left. One final summary reads, Socrates was different than most philosophers because he was seen in almost religious light, such as when Ben Franklin said that to have humility, one must imitate Jesus and Socrates. Socrates sent philosophy down a new path. Previously, philosophy focused on understanding the nature and the outside world. Socrates and those who came after him instead focused on definition and systematic thinking, which are still influential in modern times. Socrates lived and died by his beliefs and lives on as an example of the importance and difficulty of doing so. What, if anything, is wrong with this summary? This final summary is a good example. It has a focus on the important ideas in the author's own words. It's condensed. It leaves out details while containing the most important information. This is the kind of summary that you should strive for, particularly when doing an assigned summary. In addition to information about summaries, the chapter about reading also includes an extensive selection of reading strategies. Both individual reading strategies and specific pre-designed strategy sets are discussed. It's my hope that you'll take the information presented here and develop your own toolbox of reading strategies and sets that you can have available to you for challenging reading. I encourage you to develop your own personalized set of reading strategies. For inspiration and ideas, I've included many possible strategies in the textbook. There are 3 basic times that you can apply strategies: before, during, and after reading. Before reading, you can do things like planning your reading environment, thinking about what times you're usually most alert, and making the atmosphere conducive to reading. For most people, that means some area of peace and quiet, while others need background noise to feel comfortable. You should experiment and find out what your ideal environment is, and try to do your reading with that knowledge in mind. Things such as previewing or pre-reading are also recommended for before reading, as you'll be preparing your mind and activating the schemata that you'll be building on within your own mind, helping you to understand and remember better, among the other advantages of schema we discussed previously. You can look at headers, bold words, first and last sentences of paragraphs, and those sorts of textual features, and can then capitalize on that by thinking, predicting what the reading will cover, thinking about what you already know or want to learn about the subject, deciding on your goal for reading, etc. During reading, there are many types of strategies that can be helpful as well. You can try strategies that help you get involved, such as connecting the ideas to previous knowledge and evaluating the text, structuring your time by taking breaks to recharge and stopping to review, read effectively and actively by looking for key words, visualizing, rereading as needed, and keeping tabs on your mental representation of the text, and writing to support reading by taking notes or annotating, or even just underlining important parts of the text. After reading, you can write by summarizing or outlining the information, discuss the reading with others, think by drawing conclusions, and reread and review to cement the information into your mind. Finally, you should reward yourself with something you like to do once you accomplish the reading, so that your instincts will be less likely to work against reading next time. It will help you to come see reading as a positive, rewarding activity. One effective method is to create your own multi-step process for what you will do before, during, and after reading, once you have tried the various techniques and decided what will work best for you and for the situation. However, there are quite a few multi-step processes that already exist. Let's take a look at a few that were discussed in the textbook. We will take a look at 4 basic reading strategy sets that were presented in the chapter: KWL+, PPC, SQ3R, and SETS. The first reading strategy is known as KWL+, which has 4 steps. Before you read, you ask yourself, what do I already know about the topic? This activates your schema for that topic, getting your brain ready to learn and making it easier to understand and remember what you'll read. The next step is to think about what you want to learn. This primes your attention. If you know what you want to get out of it, your brain will be unconsciously scanning for that information and will store it, since you've already decided what is most important. This was demonstrated in the homeowner burglar example in the chapter on understanding and remembering. You remember more of what you think is important, so taking a moment before reading to decide what that is can be very beneficial. Then, after reading, the next step is reviewing what you have learned. This again takes advantage of how our minds work, as you learned in the last lesson, and the repetition and focus helps connect the information more solidly in place. The final step in KWL+ is the plus, deciding what else you'd like to know about the topic or what questions you'd like to have answered. The more engaged and interested you are, the more you think about the topic, the more likely you are to remember what you read. Of course, KWL+ is only one of the possible strategy sets. The next on our list is PPC, sometimes known as 3PC, since there are really 2 P's in the first step. The first step in PPC consists of previewing and pre-reading, which again activates your schemata for the topics you'll be reading about. How to preview and pre-read is discussed in detail in your textbook, which I encourage you to reference if you have questions. Once you've looked through the reading and gotten an idea of what it's about and how it's laid out, you then predict before you read. If you remember the chapter about understanding and remembering, the very last study discussed at the end of the chapter was about various groups of 3rd graders who had a short story read to them, followed by either 1, guessing what happened next, 2, reading the story aloud to make sure they pronounced all the words correctly, or 3, reading the story silently. The children who guessed what happened next remembered almost twice as well as the other groups. The same principle that helped them remember after predicting will help you, since prediction is a great way to get engaged with what you're reading. Finally, the last step in this method is coding, which is focused note-taking while you read. Your notes should be concise and relevant, more like bullet points than paragraphs. You should try to keep the notes as brief as possible, staying focused and noting down the key ideas regularly, stopping after every section or few paragraphs. Stating the main idea out loud can help you capture it much more succinctly. More helpful hints or coding are provided in the textbook. Again, PPC is just one option. There are several others, two more of which we'll discuss. SQ3R begins with a survey where you preview and pre-read, similar to the first step in the PPC method. The next step in this method is questioning, which is a great way to get engaged with the reading. As you learned in the last chapter, getting engaged is key to understanding and remembering. There are lots of questions you can ask yourself, some of which are listed in the textbook, but some key questions might be what the reading is about, what you want to get out of it, and what strategies you'll use during reading. The S and Q are, of course, followed by the 3 R's. You read, you recite by saying out loud in your own words the main points and then write them down, and then you review. This gives you useful notes in your own words, and the multiple medias, reading it, speaking it, writing it, will help you to remember more effectively. And of course, the review helps you cement the most important information in your mind through repetition. Now that we have examined 3 of our 4 pre-made strategy sets, let's take a quick look at the last one, sets. Sets asks you to connect and relate ideas. Again, this is a method of schema activation before and during reading where you think about what you already know about the topic and connect your own experiences with what you read. Next, you evaluate the text by forming your own opinions. Thinking critically engages you and will help you both understand and remember more effectively. This method also emphasizes the fact that short breaks are important to prevent burnout. Give your brain a rest every once in a while. Finally, the last step is to stop to review regularly. Divide the reading into chunks, and at the end of each one, stop to think about what you learned or what was important to help your mind create an effective summary of each part, which not only makes your understanding clearer, but helps you to remember better as well. You'll notice that these strategies overlap quite a bit. You can see some of the common elements to a successful and effective set of strategies and notice how they connect with the information presented in the chapter on understanding and remembering. I encourage you to take the inspiration from this chapter to design a reading strategy set that is the most effective for you personally. An important part of supporting reading through writing is to be able to take accurate, effective, and useful notes. Note-taking has many benefits. For one thing, it forces you to read actively as you evaluate and search out sections of the text worth summarizing or quoting for your notes. Using your hands to handwrite or type the notes also means you're interacting in another modality, both sight and touch, which will help increase your understanding and retention of the material. When you're deciding how to take your notes and what should qualify to go in them, keep your purpose in mind. The choice of type of notes as well as what to include in them both depend on the purpose of your system, as is discussed in more detail in the chapter. One important thing to remember, no matter what your purpose, from a study guide to paper material, is that the notes you take should be designed so that you do not need the source again. You want to be able to review and refer back only to your notes and not to have to go back to the original source. So you should make sure that you have accurate information, complete citation information as needed so you can go back to it if you decide there's more of use than you first thought, and be selective in what you record, but don't make it so terse or incomplete that you're just going to have to reread the source again later. You can use information from the section on identifying main ideas as one source for knowing what to select for inclusion in your notes. There are many different methods for taking notes, from ones for collecting research, like index cards, to ones for understanding and retention, such as annotation or mapping, which, along with outlining, can be useful for creating study guides. All of these methods are discussed in the chapter, and I would encourage you to take a look back at the suggestions and advice given when deciding how to do your own notes. If you'd like more advice about taking good notes aside from what's included in the chapter, there is more on taking good notes for research paper included in the textbook chapter on doing research, discussed in another video in the series. One thing that reading of any kind is good for, whether you take notes or not, is increasing your vocabulary. The most effective way to learn new words is to run into them in context and to have them reinforced by seeing them again. So, frequent reading is always the best method for increasing your vocabulary as well as your grasp of proper grammar and spelling. Experience with words pays large dividends. Other methods for expanding your vocabulary include reinforcing words you do know by using words that you run across and know but aren't yet totally familiar and comfortable with. You can also figure out the meanings of new words you come across in your reading by looking for context clues, thinking about related words through roots or sound connections, or if all else fails, or if you want to check your guess, looking in the dictionary. The very last topic I will discuss is reading faster, which is for a very good reason. Most of the information in the chapter will help you understand and remember what you're reading and be able to make use of it effectively. That is the goal and purpose of reading, understanding and remembering. While it is convenient to be able to read quickly, speed is not the goal of reading and shouldn't be a central concern. As long as you are understanding and remembering, you are doing it right. On the other hand, as I said, being able to read faster is a convenient skill that can save time, so I have devoted part of the chapter to discussing ways that you can raise your reading rate, as well as a way to assess it. Again, the primary way that you can use to increase your reading speed is by practicing your reading. The more you read, the faster you'll get at it. However, there are other strategies as well. Suggestions include avoiding distractions such as tapping your foot or multitasking or anything that distracts you from your reading, and reading actively so that you're primed for the information you'll be receiving. There are several strategies that can help with the physical part of reading, making your eye more efficient in where it looks and how many times it moves, which are discussed in detail in the chapter. Reading sprints, where you set a timer for a minute and read as fast as possible, followed by 5 minutes at a comfortable speed, can help increase your overall reading speed if done regularly. Thank you for watching. I hope that this overview was helpful and illuminating and has helped you understand how you can be a more effective reader. Please don't hesitate to contact me with any questions you may have about the material. I'm always happy to help.